Hi, this is Dr. Jarrod Spencer, sports psychologist, and welcome to the Mind of the Athlete Mental Strength CD program. This program consists of over 25 nuggets of information that I found to be the most helpful in taking athletes to higher levels of performance. May the contents of this program help you to excel in athletics and beyond. Let's get started. The conditions may be adverse. You might be sick. You might be injured. And you might think that these are situations that might set you up for poor performance. Oddly enough, one of the things that I've seen from many athletes is that when the conditions appear to be adverse, it actually sets them up for a chance for peak performance, for incredible performance. And here's why. When you think that you're not going to be able to compete at your best, and you already have the out, you have the excuse. For example, well, maybe it's raining today, and therefore, when you're running that half marathon, the conditions aren't going to be so great because it might be a little slippery. It takes the pressure off. It takes pressure off of you, and it takes the pressure off from the people around you looking at you, saying, well, maybe today you're not going to have your best performance, but just try and give what you can give. You see, when that pressure is taken off, a lot of times athletes relax. And then by relaxing more, they actually perform better. I know it may sound crazy, but some of the best performances in sports have come when athletes were sick or injured or in adverse conditions. Now that you know this, use this to your advantage. Sure, you may on the outside take the out when people give it to you and say, well, maybe this isn't going to be your best performance today. But privately on the inside, I want you to say to yourself, yeah, but I'm going to show them. This is really where I can shine. And so with that lower pressure from the inside and the outside, you would be amazed how you might perform at a level far beyond what you or others think is possible. Channel your hurt into something productive and not destructive. Look, if you're an athlete, you're exposing yourself to a lot of emotional hurt. You can't win all the time. You're not going to be healthy all the time. In fact, many athletes really struggle because emotionally they're experiencing a lot of hurts. But the key is this: how well can you channel your hurt into something productive and not destructive? Too often I see athletes, when they get injured, they begin to channel that negative energy, that hurt, into something destructive, like going out and drinking or taking a lot of time off or developing a negative attitude or giving in. Instead, what I encourage you is use that hurt for something productive. To say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to get better because of this. I'm actually going to use this for motivation to spend more time in the gym, or I'm going to rehab this injury much better than my opponent would. That essentially, the more you can channel the hurt into something productive and not destructive, the more you're on a path that's going to send you on a different trajectory to better performance. Too many of your opponents, too many of the athletes out there are taking the negative road. Don't do that. Always channel your hurt into something productive and not destructive. Come back to your senses. What do I mean by that? What I'm encouraging you to do, if you're anxious or nervous in sports, or just maybe feeling a little outside distraction before a big game, is come back to your 5 senses. Those senses are taste, touch, smell, sound, and sight. Taste, touch, sound, smell, and sight. And come back to those 5 senses. So as you're walking around the floor of the gym or walking around the field outside, try to block out all the other distractions around you. Maybe pick up some of the grass in your hand and notice how it feels. Or really take a good hard look at what's around you. The way the sun is in the sky or the fans in the stands. Take a slow, deep breath and really pay attention to the smell of the locker room or the smell of the gym. What do you taste? Maybe you grab some water or some Gatorade and just really notice the flavor of it. Maybe even close your eyes and just listen to the sounds. Maybe there's a marching band playing, or maybe there's a clanking of pads. Whatever it may be, if you want to be 100% in the moment, but you're having difficulty because your mind is being distracted by an internal dialogue that's negative and unproductive, then I encourage you, come back to your senses. Pay attention as long as you need to those 5 senses around you. Get out of your own head, get out of your own way, and come back to what's around you. This is a great technique to make you fully present in the here and the now. Are you the creme de la creme, the cream of the crop? If you are, then it's more likely that you're the person that's open and receptive to sports psychology. You see, too often in the sports world, we sometimes think that if an individual is working with a sports psychologist or open to this material, that it's the kid on the team that's got something wrong, that's struggling in some way. That's actually the opposite of what I found to be true. In fact, it's usually the best athlete or the better athletes on a team that seek my services as a sports psychologist or that read those books and watch those videos on sports psychology. I encourage you, be the creme de la creme, be the cream of the crop, be that person on your team who's getting that cutting edge, who's getting that little something extra by developing the mental side of your game. And if you need to fight against any stereotypes that may be out there about psychology or sports psychology, then use what I just said as motivation. Get that mental edge. See it as a huge advantage. Do this, and you'll be amazed at what you can do and how well you'll do it. It's easier to say no when there's a deeper burning yes. When I hear athletes talk about all the outside distractions that are creeping into their life as their athletic success increases, it gets harder and harder to say no to some of those temptations. How do we handle that? Saying yes to this deeper burning conviction inside of you. In essence, what is it inside of you that you really, really want? What's that deeper burning yes? Maybe it's, I want to win that championship. And if I get that championship, that's going to mean the world to me. And so I can say no to going out and drink, and I can say no to taking those shortcuts because this deeper burning yes, this thing I have inside of me, it fuels such a passion that I want that. What is your deeper burning yes? And what are those things that you really need to say no to in order to make that deeper burning yes a reality? It'll be easier to say no to that outside junk if that deeper burning yes is crystal clear in your mind and in your heart. If you want to have better emotional control, you need to understand some of the key emotions that you're going to experience as an athlete. Here are 4 key emotions and the definitions that are simple and concrete that I think will help you to better manage these emotions. 1, anxiety. The definition of anxiety is fear of the unknown. When you are feeling anxious, it's because there are unknowns in your life. For example, maybe you're playing a competition in an arena that you've never been to before. And so there's a lot of unknowns. But if you've been there 2 or 3 times, you know where the locker room is, you know where the bathroom is, you know what it feels like out there in center court. So I encourage you, if you have anxiety, some fear of the unknowns, focus on making all the knowns known to you. Focus on all those little things. You know, I can think of Super Bowl teams that actually go down to the venue a week ahead of time to get acclimated to the Super Bowl venue. It really helps make the unknowns known. 2, hate. Hate is feeling threatened by. When you feel threatened by somebody or something, you hate it. You may say, I really hate that person. What you're really saying is, I feel threatened by that person. Either emotionally or physically, maybe socially. Maybe they could undermine your social status, or maybe they could take your championship. Whatever it may be, if you hate somebody, there's a real threat there. Focus instead on self-confidence, on self-assurance, in eliminating any threat, knowing that there is more inside of you than you realize, and you can overcome any obstacle and eliminate any threat. 3, depression. Depression is hurt held inside. Hurt held inside. When you are holding too much emotional hurt inside, you're imploding. And when you're imploding, you're going to feel depressed. Instead, try to release those hurts in a proactive, positive way by talking about it or even crying or journaling. Don't do the opposite and explode. Too many people do that. Imploding and exploding are counterproductive ways of dealing with a hurt held inside. So depression is hurt held inside, and you got to release it in healthier ways. Lastly, fourth, is anger. A very common emotion for athletes is anger. Just getting angry about something. If you're angry, what you're really experiencing is hurt. Emotionally, you're hurting, but you just don't have the vocabulary words to describe that hurt. No one's ever taught you the difference between feeling demeaned or dismissed, or what it's like to be feeling condescended, or what it's feeling like to be belittled. But if you can learn to have better vocabulary words to describe your emotions, now you can more specifically deal with that emotion in a healthier, positive, proactive way. Instead of just saying, I don't know, I feel angry. I'm just ticked off right now. No, learn to have the better words to describe those emotions, and you can better understand how to diffuse that tension inside of you. Again, these are the 4 emotions that I see athletes experience with a lot. And these negative emotions can be counterproductive unless you, 1, understand how to define them, and 2, understand how to deal with them. Hopefully, you can have better emotional control now because you understand these 4 negative emotions. I was working with an athlete not too long ago, and I said to him, it's time to make the shift into that mindset. And what I mean by that is it's time right before a competition to dissociate. Now, that's a psychological term. And what it essentially means is a shifting into a different mindset, a different emotional state of well-being. And dissociation can sometimes have a negative connotation with it, but really in a sports sense, it can be very much a positive term that describes how we shift from one mindset to another. So, for example, if you're going to run down the field on a kickoff team, you've got to shift into a certain mindset that's necessary to run at top speed and throw your body into somebody else who's running at top speed in the equal and opposite direction, who's going to throw their body into you. It sounds crazy. It takes a certain mindset to do that. And so being able to shift into that mindset requires some practice. It requires understanding first how the mind works, and then 2, what are certain things you could say or do for yourself or to yourself to get over into that mindset. The best athletes can shift into it and shift out of it very easily. Now, that second part of it is very important, being able to shift out of it. That essentially when you walk off the playing field, that you somehow can come back to that normal everyday mindset that you would have that's more congenial and more relaxed, as opposed to a very competitive, hyper-focused mindset of when you're competing. So I encourage you to make the shifts, to actually consciously say to yourself prior to a competition, it's now time to make that shift and say and do the things necessary to get there. If you can get there, you can compete really well. If you can't get there or to the level that you need, you're going to find that you're just not as into it or that you're struggling more than you should. Be sure to make the shift. Okay, here's a dirty little secret in sports that can help you, but it might undermine others. You know what undermines performance better and faster than anything else? It's doubt. It's doubt. If you want to take somebody out of their game, sprinkle a little doubt in their mind about what they're going to do. And so if you say to somebody, are you sure you can really beat that person? Or are you sure you can make that last shot? A little bit of doubt can go a long way at taking a weak-minded person right out of their game. And so it's amazing how fragile people can be as a competition heats up or prior to a competition. And so you want to be careful with this one, but if you want to take somebody out, sprinkle a little doubt And if you want to help yourself be better, build up your defenses against when some doubt might creep in there. Now, I'm not a big fan of trash talking, but sometimes to get a competitive advantage, we do have to speak some words. And sometimes those words, if you want to be more effective with them, would be words of doubt to an opponent. Now, if they're strong-minded, this may backfire, and they may actually use that as fuel to fight back. Or that's what I encourage you to do when somebody sprinkles doubt on you. But for the weak-minded, doubt can be a very powerful tool to undermine performance. Nobody's perfect, so don't strive for that. In sports, perfection is not the goal. Make sure excellence is your goal. Why? Because perfection is not attainable. It's unrealistic. But you can do excellent things, but you can't do things perfectly. For example, the Oakland Raiders, they're a great football program. What's their slogan? Is it a tradition of perfection? No. It's a tradition of excellence, and they've got an excellent program out there. In sports, if you're trying to do things perfectly, that is going to lead you to a life of misery because you can never attain perfection. But a life of excellence is a life of bliss because you can actually achieve excellence and you can get that consistently. So do yourself a favor. When you're striving to succeed in sports, make the goal excellence, not perfection. Somebody once said, the eyes are the portal to the soul. The eyes are the portal to the soul. Since many people would agree with this, I encourage you as an athlete to really focus and work on that look you have in your eye before you can compete. Study some high performers that you admire and really look at their eyes. The eyes convey so much of what is going on deep within us. And if you can begin to apply some of the looks or some of the attributes that you will see other athletes using or mirroring to you, you will find that you will eventually get that competitive look in your eye that is reflective of deep conviction and greater performance. I can think of one athlete in particular that I know of. When I see his eyes, it's absolutely stunning. The look, the intensity, the focus that he has when he's ready to compete. What would somebody say about your look, the look in your eye when you are ready to compete? And how can you get that look to be even better? F equals MA. What do I mean by that? That's a physics expression. Force equals mass times acceleration. And for many sports, particularly the contact sports that we're talking about, force is what makes an individual so much stronger of a presence on the field. If you want to hit with greater force, if you want to have greater force, very simply, you've got to be faster and you've got to be bigger and stronger. So mass. What can you do today to get bigger and stronger? Acceleration. Are you taking the necessary steps to be faster? For example, I recall an athlete who once was a very fast individual, but never had any speed coaching. And when this individual finally had a camera set up and actually studied how he ran, he began to realize that there was a lot of small technical things he could do to run faster, to accelerate more. What are you doing regarding the M and the A? And if you focus more of your time and energy on developing these two aspects, you are going to generate a greater force. F equals MA. It's simple physics, and it makes a huge impact in sports if it's in your advantage. Ravi Zacharias, he once said that the saddest day in a person's life is the day after they achieve that thing that they thought would bring them the ultimate, but eventually just left them empty. Don't fall into this trap in sports where we think that, well, I'll be happy when I'm the starting quarterback. I'll be happy when we win the championship. As soon as I get to that level of professional athletics, then the money will take care of everything. That's a trap. And so what Ravi Zacharias was talking about is that it's important to be cultivating a deeper faith, that there's far more to sports than just winning. And really, it doesn't change things that much dramatically around us. And so when I work with athletes, I often see that the most successful athletes at any level, particularly the higher levels, as well as the most self-actualized human beings, actually have a faith component to their life. How about you? Is there a spiritual practice? Is there something greater than yourself? Is there a faith in a higher power? Is there a faith in God? Because if there is not, then you're probably operating out of a deficit. If you can incorporate a spiritual practice into your life, if you can have that faith component, it adds a whole new dimension that you might be missing. And so I'm encouraging you to cultivate your faith. Really begin to explore that possibility of bringing God into your life. Because what I've seen from clinical studies, as well as case examples again and again and again, is that for those individuals that tap into a faith component, there's incredible power, incredible wisdom, and incredible strength that they can bring to their performance that you might not be bringing if you don't have it. The kiss of death of all athletes is this. When you focus on the outcome instead of the small technical things of the process, you're doomed. So what I encourage you to do is this. Focus on the technique and not the outcome. Focus on the technique and not the outcome. All those small little technical things are in your control. And if you focus on those technical things and on the process, the outcome generally takes care of itself. If you do it the other way around, you're doomed to fail. We see this too often in sports, so I encourage you, focus on technique, not the outcome. A fundamental leadership skill is conflict resolution. If you're an athlete and you're a leader on your team, you're going to have better conflict resolution skills. Here's a technique that I suggest. When you're in a situation and you don't know if the person is either for you or against you, tell the person that you feel uncomfortable about whatever that particular topic is, or maybe you feel overextended. But those two words, uncomfortable and overextended, are very powerful words. The reason is because when you tell another person, when you tell a teammate, when you tell a coach, when you tell a reporter or a parent that you feel uncomfortable or overextended, what it forces is the person who's hearing that to make one of two decisions. One, they're either going to validate what you said and acknowledge it. Then you really know that that person is for you, cares for you, and is behind you and in your corner. The other option is that they'll minimize it. They'll dismiss what you're trying to say. They'll try to convince you otherwise. And if somebody's really doing that, then you know that their intentions are largely self-centered, self-serving. And I'm not completely convinced then that that person has your best health or interest in mind. And so again, ask that question, make that statement, pin the person into either being dismissive and minimizing, or on the flip side, the positive side, validating and empathizing what you're going through. This is a great way to help resolve conflicts because you can very clearly get a gauge on whether that person is for you or not for you. This is just one of many in the conflict resolution skills, but a vital one to help you grow as a leader. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was going into high school, and it was this. A mentor of mine said, "It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice." Let me say that again for you. It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. This was helpful wisdom because in the sports world, we often strive to be the most important person out there, and it's nice to get your name in the newspaper and have people know who you are as you move around campus. But that's not the most important factor. You see, the most important thing is to be nice to all the people around you. You see, people will often build you up, but they'll tear you down, or you may think more highly of yourself than what you actually are. And so all of these things can change and end when one injury comes, or maybe somebody takes your starting position. Then what? The most important factor is to be nice to everybody along the way. And if you can start doing that, treating the least among you with kindness, you'll be amazed at how you draw more support, people like you. Think about this. Who are the people in your classroom who are the least popular? Who are the people you pass maybe in the hallway that don't get the notoriety? What could you do as a prominent athlete to just be kind to them, to be nice to them, to encourage them? Maybe you might even just speak a kind word or invite them to a game. Boy, you'd be surprised at how that person would like to come to the game because now he's got a connection to you. It goes a long way at developing a culture around you that's far more positive when you're trying to be nice to the least of the people around you, as well as the people around you that might be getting some of that notoriety. Remember, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. Do you play inspired? Can you think of somebody right now in the sports world that had an inspired experience or performance? When we think of sports, we often think that inspiration or being inspired is a vital part of higher level success. I would agree with that. And if we break down that word inspired, what it really means is in spirit. In spirit, that somehow there's a spiritual component to that athlete's performance. How about for you? Are you bringing a spiritual component into your life, into your game, into your performance? In other words, is God in the mix of this for you? If you are doing so, you may find that you are tapping into an additional source of strength that can send you, like many athletes have gone before you, to even higher levels of performance because you are inspired. You are in spirit. Are you intense? I hope so. If you're an athlete and you are intense, that's generally a good thing. But be careful with this because intense really means in tension. And a lot of times that tension is good, but it's a fine line. If you're an athlete and you're too intense, that the tension you're holding inside may begin to reach counterproductive levels. If that's you, I encourage you to find a way to break that tension, to release that tension. Now, I'm biased, but certainly talking about that tension is one of the very best ways to relieve it. Unfortunately, in the sports world, you are so indoctrinated with such messages as suck it up, deal with it, don't whine or complain. But that's actually sometimes not the best way to handle some of those deeper tensions. And what if those tensions are harsh realities of life and there's nothing you can really do and talking about it may not be enough to really resolve it? Then I encourage you to take that tension and channel it into positive and productive ways, and not allow that tension to destroy you or to zap you of your emotional energy necessary for greater performance. It's good to be intense. It's good to have a little tension, and that tension can be good, but be mindful not to have it tip too far over and have the tension become counterproductive to your performance. Joy in your heart. That is the feeling that leads to unlimited energy and great performance. When you were little, think of a game that you played outside like manhunt or kick the can or just hide and seek. You could play that game all night long, all day long, and you can compete because you had joy in your heart. In sports, I encourage you to compete with that same joy. You could run really fast, jump really high, and go farther and longer if that positive source of feeling and emotion is what's generating the performance. Too often, the fuel that we sometimes use is negative, and that's going to lead to earlier exhaustion emotionally and physically. Compete with joy in your heart. Ask yourself today, why do I really love this? What do I get out of it? And how can I make this more pleasurable for me so that that feeling of joy is bubbling up? Think about these things on your next ride to practice or a competition. Let that joy spring up inside of you, and you'll be amazed to find that there's endless energy and better performance. In order to succeed in sports, you're going to have to make better decisions. How do we make better decisions? Split-second decisions? The recipe for better decisions is this: deeper psychological insight plus greater self-awareness equals better judgment. If you're going to have better decision-making, your judgment's going to have to be improved in a millisecond. And you get that by deepening your psychological insight and broadening your self-awareness. What exactly does that mean? What it means is, 1, know thyself. You've got to look within yourself and understand why you do what you do. The psychological underpinnings of behaviors and thoughts is far more profound than meets the eye. That is developing psychological insight, and that comes with great counseling. A broader self-awareness is your ability to see what's going on in the world around you and be able to process that so quickly and to see how all those pieces fit together. It's as though you could walk into a room and pretty much understand what's going on with all the people around you. That really helps, for example, on the football field when there's 22 guys out there all moving around and you've got great awareness of what's happening out there. Deeper psychological insight plus broader awareness. When you put those two together, you will consistently see people making better choices, having better judgment, having better split-second decision making. What can you do to deepen your psychological insight? How might you develop your awareness to make it broader? If you can do these things, you'll have better judgment. And in a millisecond, your decisions will be that of champions. I want to teach you about the performance curve. This is a vital curve that can transform your performance. I want you to think of this bell-shaped curve, if you will. And on the bottom axis, you have stress. On the vertical axis, you have performance. And on this bell-shaped curve, at the very top of that, imagine a little X at the top of that bell-shaped curve. That's your peak performance. That's your optimal performance. You see, as you move to the right and the stress increases, so too does your performance. And I want you to imagine a little box, a rectangular box around the whole top part of the performance curve. That's being in the zone. That's where you want to be to have great overall performance. Here's the problem. For many athletes, they're sometimes not amped up enough at the start of a competition, and therefore they're not quite in that rectangular box. They're not in the zone. And if you're not quite there and your opponent is, you're going to really struggle early on. You're going to get behind early. You simply need to work on getting more amped up before the game. What I typically see, though, is this. Most athletes are on the backside of that rectangle or the backside of that curve. And so they're too amped up too soon. And so what happens is as the game wears on, they're now dropping in their performance on the backside of the curve because the stress is mounting and they're just worn out. So you don't want to be too amped up too soon, but you want to be amped up enough that you're in the curve. How do we do that? Well, you're doing a lot of great things already, but one of the things that I always encourage athletes is to have relaxing music on their iPod. Because if you're getting too amped up too soon, meaning you're listening to your hip hop music or your classic rock music on the bus ride, and you're feeling so amped and ready for the game 2 hours beforehand, you're hitting that zone too soon. You want to instead listen to relaxing music or no music at all and keep yourself out of that zone, but switch at the appropriate time so that you can get into that zone and be able to stay in that zone for the whole game. That's what the best athletes do. They stay in the zone the whole game because they've learned to regulate how to ramp up, how to ramp down, and how to do it at the right time so they can have peak performance. This is the performance curve. And if you can learn how to hit the right spot on the curve at the right time, you too can have consistency of high performance. Where do you want to go in life? I want you to think about that place that you want to be. Maybe a college that you want to attend, a sport that you want to play. Maybe it's even in the pros. And I want you to apply one of the greatest techniques that was ever taught to me as a high school athlete. It's very simply this. Above your bed, I want you to tape on the ceiling a postcard, a picture of that stadium that you want to play in or that college that you want to go to. Essentially, by placing a picture above your bed, it'll become the first thing you see when you wake up and the last thing you see when you go to bed. And I want you to ask yourself every morning when you wake up, what am I going to do today that's going to take me one step closer to getting from here to there? And every night when you go to bed, before you shut your eyes and you look up at that picture, I want you to ask yourself, what did I do today? Did I do enough today? How was my day in order to get me, again, from here to there? It becomes such an important reminder in your daily life to make sure you're doing the necessary things to get you where you really want to go. So I ask you, what picture would you put above your bed, and what are you willing to do to get there? Recite some poetry. That may not be something that you've heard many coaches say to you in the past, but as a sports psychologist, I'm going to encourage you to memorize some poetry. Why? Because when you are competing in certain sports, like maybe you're out for a long run, or maybe you're cycling, maybe it's a triathlon, what you can do to help you get through those moments of when your mind might begin to go to something negative is to have memorized some poetry that can help you persevere in those tough times. One of my favorite poems is the Pressure poem. Its author is unknown. And that was a poem that was taught to me in high school. And so it's easy to remember some poetry when your mind is relaxed. But in the middle of competition, could you actually recite it? Could you get it close to what it's actually supposed to be? That's a little tougher, but what you see is that when you try really hard to think about it and to think about a poem that has good positive meaning to you and that has a good, strong, encouraging message to it, then what happens is that it pulls your mind out of that funk, out of that negative set that it was in, and it will gradually push you back into that high performance mindset, that positive thinking mindset. What poems do you like? What poems mean something to you? And if you don't have a poem, then I encourage you to check out the Pressure poem. And that's available on the Mind of the Athlete website. Get a poem, memorize it, try to recite it when you're in the middle of training or competition to help propel you back into that positive thinking mindset. From there, you can do amazing things. Performance anxiety. It's something that undermines so many great athletes. And if you've never experienced it yet, you might experience it eventually when the stage gets big enough. One of the things that I work with many athletes on is learning how to manage that performance anxiety. One fundamental technique that I encourage people to work on is to manage the precursors way before that big stage, all the small little aspects that they can that are actually going to be leading up to the big competition. Here's why. The definition of anxiety that I like is fear of the unknown. Anxiety is fear of the unknown. And so it's normal and natural to have a certain level of anxiety prior to a competition. But we can manage some of that by managing the precursors, by managing all the variables that we can make known. So focus your mind on all the things that you do know. What the locker room might look like, or the bus ride and what that's going to be like, or who you're specifically going to be competing against, or how you're feeling and what you ate and your energy level and your rest level and your gear, all the many little small variables. Just replay them in your head like, I know this, and I know this. The more you can focus on the knowns, that's going to lessen some of the anxiety. And if there are some unknowns that you might be able to make known, that's another great way to lessen some of the anxiety. So if you want to have better performance, you want to decrease performance anxiety. And one of the techniques to decrease performance anxiety is to better manage the precursors, all the knowns that you can take care of. If you can take care of all those known variables, it makes less unknown variables out there and will lessen the anxiety. The Pressure Poem. Author, unknown. How do you act when the pressure's on? When the chance of victory is almost gone? When fortune's stars have refused to shine? When the ball is on your own 5-yard line? How do you act when the going gets tough? Do your spirits lag when the breaks are rough? Or is there in you a flame that grows brighter as the battle grows fiercer? How long, how hard will you fight the foe? That is what the world would like to know. Cowards can fight when they're out ahead, but an uphill grind, that shows a thoroughbred. So if you wish for success, then tell me, son, how will you act when the pressure is on? Cognitive reframing is a powerful psychological tool. What I encourage you as an athlete to do is to reframe everything of the past to set you up to succeed in the future. Reframe everything, no matter what it was. Maybe it was a loss, maybe it was an injury, maybe it was a poor play that you made, whatever it may be. As an athlete, you're going to have tons of mistakes, tons of problems, tons of drama and trauma of the past. The key is simply, can you reframe it to set you up for success in the future? It may be that you have an injury mid-season and suddenly you're down and depressed and frustrated. But what I encourage you to do is instead flip it around and say, hey, look, this isn't the injury that I wanted to have, and this isn't the time of the year that I have, but it's a little bit of a break, a little bit of a reprieve. And so I appreciate the break, and that's going to make me have more energy and be even more focused for the end of the season, because I can still train and do some things despite this nagging injury, but I'm going to be more ready for postseason competition because of the little break that I'm getting right now emotionally, not having to compete and play. That's an example of a really great cognitive reframe, a reframe of something in the past that will set you up for success in the future. This is something that all champions do. How about you? A universal symbol for power and control is to take your two hands and just tap the fingertips together, or maybe even the whole hands together in a prayer position. Whatever it may be, this is a universal symbol for power and control. And so I encourage you before a competition, when you're feeling a little anxious, to just take your fingertips, tap them together, and to say to yourself, I'm in control. I've got the power in this situation. Or maybe this is a technique you can share with your coach so that when you're out there competing, he or she may very simply make that gesture of tapping their fingertips together, all 5 fingers touching the other 5 fingers, and reminding you, hey, you're in control. You've got the power in this situation, and you can do it. Take out the trash. This is a technique that I use with many athletes and many teams prior to competition in order to help them clear their mind so that they can have better performance. The technique goes like this. Prior to a practice or a game, I want you to pull out a piece of paper and I want you to list all the stressors that are on your mind, in particular in your preconscious mind. And I want you to just jot down what they may be on a piece of paper. Spend 2 to 3 to 5 minutes just clearing out this stuff, taking out the trash from your mind. Then what I want you to do is acknowledge those stressors and say to yourself, there's nothing I can do about them right now, and so I'm going to tear them up. And go ahead and tear up that piece of paper in a lot of small pieces, and I want you to go ahead and throw that in the nearest trash can. And that the exercise of actually doing that is acknowledging the things in your preconscious mind, processing it, and clearing it out. That's taking out the trash. If you can take out the trash, it can help you be more focused in the moment. What's on the doorway of your bedroom before you leave? Or what's on the wall in your bedroom? What I encourage athletes to do is to make a collage, an image of all the sports pictures that they love, maybe cutting up pictures out of a magazine or a newspaper and making a wall of all of those images that remind you of what you want to achieve or want to feel in sports. Likewise, above your doorway as you leave, to make a mantra, which is that word or phrase you repeat to yourself to elicit a desired emotional state, and make that mantra, that phrase, printed out on a piece of paper so every time you walk out of your bedroom door, you tap it, you hit it. Very simply, by having that collage of pictures or having that sign above your bedroom door, these are two great ways that as you leave your place of resting and relaxing in this world and you head out into the training ground that is this world, that you would be constantly reminded of what you want to feel, what experiences you want to get, and where you're really going. What's above your door, and what pictures can you put on that collage today? What's your mantra? What's a mantra? A mantra is a word or phrase that you repeat to yourself to elicit the desired emotional state. So a mantra is the word or phrase you repeat to yourself to elicit the desired emotional state. And so as an athlete, you've got to be in a certain emotional state in order to have great performance. And so saying to yourself a key phrase or a key word can help shift your mind into that emotional state. For example, I knew one athlete who used the mantra, relentless attack. Relentless attack. And he would say this to himself over and over again as a way to kind of shift his mind into the mindset that he really needed for great performance. There are lots of examples of athletes having mantras someplace. I think of Evander Holyfield on his boxing trunks. Philippians 4:13 was down there. It said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so if you keep your eyes peeled, you will see athletes have their mantra, sometimes on a wristband, on a hat, anywhere on their body or anywhere on their gear, or just privately in their own mind. But somewhere they have that phrase that means so much to them because it shifts them into that optimal emotional state for great performance. So I ask you, what's your mantra? Thanks so much for listening to the Mind of the Athlete Mental Strength CD program. I applaud you for developing the mental side of your game. If you want more information, check out our website at www.mindoftheathlete.com.